Oftentimes, when discussions transpire concerning groups like the Society of St. Pius X and individuals like Archbishop Lefebvre, it is common for opponents of tradition to argue, well, they have no canonical mission. But what is meant by canonical mission? Canonical mission in a nutshell means the authority for a priest to participate in the mission of the Church of dispensing sacraments and offering masses, derived from being sent by a bishop with apostolic succession. In order to meet the needs of the faithful, bishops have occasionally acted outside the bounds of established canonical norms during times of crisis in the Church. In some cases, they have even been known to consecrate bishops against the explicit will of the hierarchy and disciplinary norms. St. Eusebius of Samosata traveled throughout the Eastern churches that the Arians had destroyed in the 4th century, installing and consecrating Catholic bishops. In contrast to Archbishop Lefebvre, who only consecrated bishops as auxiliaries with no canonical mission and only used the office's authority to ordain priests and perform confirmations, Bishop Eusebius went even further and actually installed his bishops as prelates to act as though they had jurisdiction. The Arian crisis, which made it almost impossible for Catholics to join the local churches without running the risk of being exposed to the heresy of Arianism that rejected Christ's divinity, served as Eusebius's justification. Given that Lefebvre was observing the ascent of modernism within the hierarchy, which is the synthesis of all heresies according to Pope St. Pius X, and thus an even greater heresy than Arianism, his circumstances make sense. He was given the authority because of the state of necessity. This is also why one's understanding and interpretation of the crisis and its scope is crucial. Otherwise, they will not understand the reason why Lefebvre and other like-minded clergy acted as he did when consecrating 4 bishops in 1988 without explicit approval from Rome. Lefebvre believed that the biggest crisis in church history was upon us. If we are in an age of apostasy, then bishops have a duty to act with necessity, just like St. Athanasius and St. Eusebius did in their day with the Arians. St. Athanasius was exiled from his own apostolic see on 5 different occasions by Arian heretics, and yet he still offered the sacraments to the faithful in need, because he knew the sacraments were needed for salvation. It can be demonstrated that Rome was not willing to work with Lefebvre and wanted him to succumb to their compromises with modernism. He was left with no options, and the salvation of souls remains the highest and most important law of the Church. As far back as 1987, Archbishop Lefebvre was in back-and-forth communication with Cardinal Ratzinger, the future Benedict XVI, and he was expressing his concerns with Rome's direction. Ratzinger wanted Lefebvre to give support to Vatican II, while Lefebvre continued to maintain issues with religious liberty being opposed to traditional doctrine, as well as the novel push for ecumenism. The Vatican held a meeting in April of 1988, deciding that Lefebvre would have to sign a formula agreeing to Vatican II's controversial Lumen Gentium, as well as the full acceptance of the new liturgy and the new code of canon law, despite Lefebvre's repeated concerns with all of these. Lefebvre ended up signing the formula as a good faith effort, hoping Rome would then allow him to ordain new bishops, but Rome continued to drag its feet on this request and said they still had to deliberate on it. Even though Lefebvre had signed their declaration, Rome was vague concerning the request for Lefebvre to ordain new bishops for the society. No date was fixed, no candidate was agreed upon. This caused Lefebvre great concern, especially at his advanced age, and after witnessing the atrocities committed by the hierarchy from the very top, such as the Assisi Interfaith meetings and numerous visits to synagogues. One can only imagine what his reaction would have been to the 1993 Directory from Ecumenism, or Summorum Pontificum of Benedict XVI, or Traditionis Custodes of Francis, or Pachamama, the Abrahamic Family House, the Synodal Path, just to name a few. Rome kept extending and delaying his requests even after he signed their declaration. Nearly 3 weeks after signing the declaration, Ratzinger met with Lefebvre to let him know the approval for his episcopal ordinations were still delayed and being reviewed. Lefebvre felt mounting pressure for the society to conform to Vatican II and John Paul II's pastoral directives in order to receive approval. In response, Lefebvre wrote this to Ratzinger, quote, It appears clear that the goal of these dialogues is to reabsorb us within the conciliar church. With much regret, we feel obliged to ask that, before the date of June 1st, you indicate clearly to us what the intentions of the Holy See are. Without an answer to this request, I shall proceed with the publication of the names of the candidates to the episcopacy whom I will consecrate on June 30th. My health and the apostolic necessities for the growth of our work do not allow for further delay." End quote. On May 10, 1988, Archbishop Lefebvre spoke at a conference where he discussed a conversation he had with Cardinal Ratzinger on May 6th. He was now being asked not only to agree with Vatican II's religious liberty and ecumenism, but also agreeing to offer one New Order Mass a week in Paris. This was after he signed Rome's declaration regarding Lumen Gentium on collegiality, the validity of Paul VI's New Order Mass, and the new Code of Canon Law. He then asked if June 30th would be approved for his ordinations, and he was told no guarantee could be given for the remainder of the year in 1988. Lefebvre addressed a letter to John Paul II directly on June 2nd, outlining his concerns and writing of the, quote, absolute necessity of having ecclesiastical authorities who will help us to protect ourselves against the spirit of Vatican II and the spirit of Assisi, end quote. Rome wanted Lefebvre to concede to their requests, especially regarding offering the New Order Mass, and that was a hill that Lefebvre was willing to die on rather than compromise. He was convinced that we were in a full-scale time of apostasy. Once the Assisi interfaith meetings happened, Lefebvre knew that we were in the greatest crisis in the history of the Church. When a sitting pope can preside over an event with satanic animists and pagan religions, and allow Buddhists to place an idol on top of a tabernacle, and then praise the event and say it was connected to Vatican II, Lefebvre saw very clearly without scruple. People either choose to see this or they choose not to see it, but the evidence is right there for everyone to see.